Just making sure that I'm live. So yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, good people. Thanks for joining me. A little bit late. Had some more technical difficulties. Uh Trying to figure out how I'm gonna do these lives technically going forward. Always trying new things, so always something happens. So sorry I'm a little bit late. But tonight's live is not gonna be a super long one. Hopefully. So yeah, if you cannot hear me, please let me know. If you can't hear me okay, please let me know. So yay or nay. Let me know before I get started. Now make sure wifey knows I'm live. Okay, so the purpose or the topic of today's live is toxic behavior in the dance community and solutions, right? And most of my lives, I'm going to talk about solutions because, well, it's one thing to complain about things, but I'm very big always on being solution oriented and constructive, yeah? So, in that vein, before I begin, a couple disclaimers and caveats. The last time I went live, some people came on and were very nasty and disrespectful. And anyone who does that in this live, I'm not going to be as nice as I was last time. So, yeah, if your intent is clout chasing, distraction, deflection, or anything else that isn't constructive, you will be blocked immediately. If you're someone who wants to talk to me about something that's probably best handled privately, just handle it privately. Hit me up privately. My inbox is open to all who come in good faith. But this live is not the time to do that. So fair warning, again, I'm not going to be as nice this time. So, toxicity in the dance community and solutions. And before I get into this, I just want to make sure that wifey knows I'm live. Hopefully she does, so she can share it for me. Yama. Okay. Let me make sure. I'm just gonna make sure that it's been shared to my own page, at least, because wifey might be asleep by now. Yeah, she might have caught a nap. Fair enough. So yeah, let me just share this real quick to my own page. So yeah, I hope everybody's doing all right so far. I appreciate everybody tuning in and joining me to this, joining me in this topic that's very important, especially with all that's going on in our community right now. So yeah, toxic behavior in the dance community. I'm going to focus on mainly three types of toxic behavior. And the first one is probably going to be no surprise to anybody, and that is sexual misconduct, right? And I said sexual misconduct for a reason, yeah? Because, a lot of the times, and especially like even us as advocates, rape and sexual assault tends to get the lion's share of the, I guess, attention. But there's a lot of different types of sexual misconduct that goes on in the dance community. And I'm not going to talk too much about actual like what it is because a lot of people have already talked about that. What I'm going to focus on is more the stuff that hasn't been talked about as much, and also some of the things I've seen people who've been accused of sexual misconduct, how they've responded in a way that I think is rather toxic. So, here we go. So, sexual misconduct is not just your rape, sexual assault, penetrative assault, things like that, but it's also stuff like, sexual harassment, groping, inappropriate touching, things like even coercion. When you're trying to pressure people past I guess we would say a reasonable point, when you're using a position of influence or power to make someone, take away someone else's agency, things like that. And for us, all these behaviors that take away somebody's agency are problematic. Yeah. All of these behaviors are a bad look. But recently in the dance community, we've had a lot of survivors. And I say survivors, some people prefer victims, some people prefer survivors. So victims/survivors have come forward sharing their stories of, sexual assault and different types of sexual misconduct, right? And the response has been very interesting. And, before I even talk about that, I just have a question for you guys. Have you ever seen someone accused of sexual assault own up to it, take responsibility for it, give a genuine apology, right? I can't think of one genuine apology I have seen yet, ever, from someone accused of sexual assault, right? What I have seen is there's always a threat to sue, legal action, right? There have been a couple times where people have threatened to release private photos and videos, which not only is that a crime, but, apparently this is something that predators tend to use, and a lot of predators out there are currently using to keep victims and survivors silent. Because the idea is if you come forward with your stories, I'm going to release these photos, these videos, might even be compromising conversations, right? That might embarrass them. And this is horrible. This is really, really toxic, and it's wrong. There have been conversations about slut shaming recently where, basically the idea is, and, whether or not people actually feel this way, this is the message that it gives. That only women who don't dress a certain way, who don't sleep with X amount of people, who don't, do X, Y, Z, if you engage in those behaviors, you're somehow deserving of assault. It's things like, you'll have people criticize a predator, and then the defense is, well, you shouldn't have been wearing this. You shouldn't have been doing this. You shouldn't have been going here, right? Why would you go to a hotel room if, you didn't think anything was going to happen? Maybe because they were invited to a hotel room for something else, like, I don't know, dance lesson, right? Like things like this that, again, you put the onus or the blame on the victim/survivor instead of where it belongs, on the perpetrators. And this is a problem. See, just making the comments so I can see if people make comments. Yeah. These behaviors, they are toxic. And it's wrong. And, it would be nice to see some real accountability, but I've yet to see any of it. Now, I have seen some attempts to gaslight, but I'm going to talk about that at the end, where I talk about some of the things that toxic people do to try to avoid accountability. But yeah, this sexual misconduct that's been going on, it's wrong, people. It's wrong. And it's not just rape or sexual assault. All of it is wrong. And I've seen people say things that, basically to the effect of, I didn't know this was wrong. But it's like, look, if you are taking away someone else's agency, how do you not know that this is wrong? Right? I mean, I know there are some gray areas. Maybe you hit on somebody and you're not sure whether they're being coy with you or not. But generally speaking, when you take away somebody's agency, it should be pretty apparent, pretty clear that what you're doing is wrong. And I'm seeing I've seen some conversations to the effect of, we need to teach A, B, and C how to be better people. And I say, look, it's not our job as a dance community to teach people how to be decent human beings. It's your job as an individual to be a decent human being. It's not my job or anybody else's job to teach you that, right? And if you don't know what that means, or you don't know how to be a decent human being, you don't deserve to be a part of our community. You don't deserve, and you certainly don't deserve to be paid to be a part of our community, right? But yeah, these are things that I'm seeing. And, I don't want to waste too much time arguing on social media with people about this, but this is what I call toxic enablement, and that's the third thing that I'm going to talk about. But yeah, like this sexual misconduct, it needs to end. And what is the solution? I'll talk about that in the end, but the solution is very obvious, right? Don't support people. And it's not just rapists, and it's not just people who sexually assault folks. Anyone who doesn't understand what consent means doesn't deserve to be a part of our community. And that doesn't mean, and again, we'll talk about some of the disingenuous apologies that you see people putting out there at the end. But yeah, real accountability is when the number one people who you're accountable to are to the people who you've hurt, right? So until you've worked things out with them and made things right and been punished, like that's the other thing. Being accountable includes some sort of punishment. Trying to evade the punishment is not holding yourself accountable. That's just gaslighting, and I'll talk about that again at the end because I'm getting sidetracked. But yeah, this is wrong, guys. Like, and it's sad that in 2020 we have to talk to people about basic things like consent. Like, if someone doesn't, consent to do something, don't do it, right? Or if you are an artist, instructor, DJ, organizer, somebody in a position of influence, and you're in a professional capacity, the standard is going to be even higher on you. For us, we've canceled people for far less than sexual assault and rape. And the reason is because there's a difference between a regular, and I say regular, not to be insulting in any way, but that means you're not in a position where you're being paid or you're in a position of power. If you are at an event in a professional capacity, you're representing yourself, you're representing your dance, you're representing the organizer. So the standard of your behavior is going to be even higher, right? So, anything less than full accountability and owning your shit is unacceptable. And I haven't seen anyone yet who's been called out for bad behavior truly hold themselves accountable. Not yet. And this is sad. But at the same time, I'm glad that I'm seeing this because hopefully for the people watching, it should be very clear right now who some of the bad actors are and who some of the people supporting them are, right? But I've talked too much about sexual misconduct for this one. But just to cap it off, any type of sexual misconduct that takes away somebody's agency, gaslighting, coercion, sexual harassment, inappropriate touching, and also obviously penetrative rape, sexual assault, all of this is inappropriate. None of it has any place in our dance community. As far as the solutions, I'll talk about that in the end because I'm trying to be more concise this time. But yeah, sexual misconduct. To people who've been accused of wrongdoing, if you're trying to slut shame, if you're threatening to release private photos and videos, hey Andre, what's good? If you're threatening, because I'm sorry, and even if I don't know somebody, if I see somebody out there threatening to release private videos and photos, I'm thinking this is not the first time this person has done that. That's just me. And I don't even know what they're necessarily been accused of, but that's what I'm thinking, right? Anyone who would do that. But, the fact, Susan Burke asked, what is gaslighting? Okay. So, and I'll talk a little bit about, I've talked a couple times about tools of toxic manipulators, and gaslighting is a combination of a few of them. So the tools of toxic manipulators that I talk about, there's a few of them. There's bribery, which is a good one, right? Offer people something, prey upon the opportunistic impulses of people. That's probably one of the most effective. Bribery, threats and bullying, lies, deflection, which is basically when you pull an okey doke to take people, it's like the Wizard of Oz. There's nothing to see over there. That's deflection. Projection, which is when you take something that you've engaged in or that you don't like and you project it onto someone else. It's a way to deflect from you. Let's see. I got the threats, bullying, bribery, flattery. That's usually pretty good. Give people compliments, make them feel good. They associate their good feeling with you. Lies, I mentioned that. And Oh, pity. Pity's a big one, right? Get people to feel sorry for you, even if you say something like, I'm not looking for your pity. But you use that pity and then you use it to manipulate people. But gaslighting is basically, and this is a term that I didn't really hear used a lot until recently, right? But basically, it's it's when you through, and it's usually through a number of the methods I just mentioned, you try to affect somebody else's reality to make them think they're crazy, or to, again, try to change reality in a way that benefits you. As an example, if somebody is accused of, say, sexual assault, right? And then your response is, you know you wanted it, you know you wanted it. Or, and this is more used, let's say you haven't sexually assaulted someone, but you're trying to coerce someone, right? So you're really coming on to somebody really, really strong, and then maybe they give in, and not because they consented, but maybe they're just, they're starting to feel unsafe, right? And then you basically try to convince them that it was consensual, saying things like, oh yeah, you know you wanted it, you wouldn't have did it if you didn't want it, or things like that, right? Another really popular gaslighting tactic right now is, if you are accused of sexual assault or sexual misconduct, you present yourself as a sexual misconduct or rape victim survivor advocate, right? And that's something that's happening right now. You have people who are trying to now present themselves as some sort of advocate on behalf of survivors, when they themselves are predators who perpetrated sexual misconduct against people, and some of these people have not even really been held accountable for their bad acts, but they're now trying to put themselves out there as an advocate. Now, this is gaslighting because, one, if you don't know who somebody is, right? If you don't know their sordid details of their past, if somebody presents themselves as an advocate, you're going to think, oh, they can't be guilty of this misconduct because they're advocates, right? But no, that's actually one of the most clever and cunning ways that you're seeing predators gaslight right now. Ooh. Oh, good. Yeah. Cool. Wifey's on it with the text. Beautiful. Yeah. That's even better than I can say. But yeah. Psychological manipulation. And again, usually it uses the things that I talked about: threats, flattery, pity, deflection, projection, lies. You'll see all of this stuff in the most talented gaslighters. And that's something that's happening a lot right now. Right now. Okay, so sexual misconduct. Everybody's talking about it. I don't need to talk about that all night. I'll just focus on the solutions at the end. Okay, so the next type of toxic behavior is disrespect. Now, most of you guys out there, you know what disrespect is, right? And you see it in different kinds of ways. You see disrespect like, people talking trash about somebody's dance ability, which has been a pretty common one in the dance scene. If you disagree with someone, or they don't like you, or they want to hurt you, they'll talk trash about your dance ability. They'll talk trash about your business or your brand, or, if you put out a dance video, you'll see people try to pile on and talk trash about that. You guys have seen this kind of behavior, right? And, and it's not just dance ability. Sometimes it becomes personal, right? As those of you who watched my last live, you saw how disrespect became personal for us when my mother was disrespected, right? But this is something that's been going on for a long time. And, I don't need to tell you guys that this is wrong, right? But I have to mention it because it ties into the third toxic behavior, which is enablement. And I want to talk a lot about that because that's probably, other than sexual misconduct, the biggest problem right now, right? So, sometimes, and here's a problem, sometimes when the person being disrespected is somebody that you don't like, it's easy to kind of go along with it because, a lot of people, they like to see people put the screws to people that they don't like, right? It's kind of like a Schadenfreude thing. It's like you don't like somebody, so you enjoy seeing them put down, even if it's unjust, right? But the problem is, especially when people in positions of influence, and I'm not just talking about your DJs and instructors and organizers. I'm talking about anybody, right? Because whether we want to think about it or not, all of us as dancers, what we do reflects on the dance community, right? And I'm speaking about Kizomba right now because, again, everything that I'm talking about doesn't just relate to Kizomba or to dance. It relates to every sphere of human endeavor. But I'm talking mostly about Kizomba right now because I'm in the position to do the most in Kizomba. But this applies everywhere. All of us, the way we treat people, the way we carry ourselves, we are representing not only ourselves, but also the dance that the dance community we belong to. And I've seen many times in Kizomba where, people will look at the conversations online and they'll see the condescending, haughty tones, the disrespect, and they think, I don't want to be a part of this community because these people are nasty, right? There are people in the community who've kind of made a career out of being nasty, right? A couple of whom I called out last week, right? And this is a problem, guys, because you have to think past, your own. Like for me, even if it's somebody I don't like seeing people disrespected, right? And if you'll notice, for me, I'm very big on constructive criticism. And, I have to distinguish here between constructive criticism and personal attacks and disrespect, okay? A constructive criticism is delivered with the intent to do some sort of greater good or something like that, right? Like, for instance, when I used to, I would criticize instructors, generally, not specifically because I didn't want to shame anybody, but I criticize instructors who didn't take the time to properly learn Kizomba and Semba because I feel like that has caused issues in the community where dancers aren't getting the proper foundation and they can't dance with everybody, right? So I've criticized instructors who haven't done that, right? Now, some people got butthurt about it and angry about it, and they don't like me to this day because of that, but I gave that criticism, one, never with the intent to shame or disrespect anyone, and I had a greater good in mind, right? To distinguish that, what you'll often see sometimes on social media is people will start to pile on to somebody, and usually it's somebody who's displeased someone in a position of influence, right? Often these are also some of the same people who are either predators or who have enabled the predators. And again, toxicity is toxicity. And where you see one major thing, you tend to see all of them, right? And so people will pile on and try to disrespect and talk trash to hurt someone, to harm someone. This has happened to us a lot, but it's happened to a lot of other people too, right? And this is not a good look. It's not a good look for anybody because you have to think, who do you want to be in our dance community, right? You want good people, as organizers, as professionals, when we think about the demographic that we want to join our community, we want people basically who could do anything, right? These are people who have options. Why would somebody who has options want to be a part of a nasty, disrespectful community, right? And part of the reason why we created the Kizomba Unity Group, speaking of which, if you guys want to be a part of the solution and talk about some of these issues in kind of a safe space, join the Kizomba Unity Group. And part of the reason we made this group is we didn't want to, air the dirty laundry, so to speak, in front of everybody when we could just speak as a community and iron out some of the things, and then we can come back and present Kizomba as the respectful dance it is, and our community as the respectful community it should be, right? So yeah, everybody out there disrespecting people, everybody, and a lot of people think it's cute and funny until you get disrespected or somebody close to you gets disrespected, right? I always like to say, treat others how you'd like to be treated. And, somebody shared an article recently that said, treat others the way they'd like to be treated. And I like that even more. So, treat people with respect. And, this ties in mostly with the third thing that's going on, which is one of the most toxic things, which is enablement culture, right? Because disrespect is only dangerous because it's being enabled, right? And what do I mean by enabled? Let me make sure. Cool. Yeah. So basically, enablement is when somebody engages in wrong or harmful behavior and you look the other way, right? Sometimes it's you looking the other way. Sometimes it's you continuing to support. And sometimes it's actually engaging in the bad behavior along with them, right? And this is sometimes insidious, but it is really, 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 really dangerous. And I often talk about cliquishness, and I often say cliquishness in and of itself, is not a problem. It's the results. It's the side effects of the cliquishness, which is mediocrity and enablement of this toxic behavior, right? And what do I mean by cliquishness? So basically, a clique is basically a group of friends, right? At its base, that have something in common. Maybe they share a dance or music preference. Maybe they're from the same country or a part of the same cultural group, right? Maybe they share the same gender or same, race or whatever it is. There's something usually that unites them. Now, the difference between what I say a clique and a community is often the way people who are not a part of that group are treated, right? Let's say if you go to a party or an event where there's a very cliquish vibe and you're not a part of the inner circle of said clique, you're probably not going to feel very welcome, right? And inclusion and things like that have been talked about a lot recently, but you don't see a whole lot of people talking about that aspect. Everybody just wants to say they're inclusive, right? But you can't be inclusive if you're cliquish, right? But that in and of itself, just having a group of friends isn't the problem. The problem is when you look the other way or support or encourage people who engage in toxic and harmful behavior. And I forgot to say what I mean when I say toxic. Toxicity is basically something that is harmful. It's either harmful physically, it's harmful mentally, it's harmful to your energy or your spirit. It's either harmful to you or it's harmful to people around you. Often it's harmful to both. And this is what I'm talking about, okay? Things that are harmful. Often people who are part of the same group or want to be a part of the same group will look the other way when people engage in bad behavior. Now, this is including but not limited to the sexual misconduct, right? The cliquishness and enablement culture is the main reason why a lot of these predators are still here. If it wasn't for this enablement, yes, cliques are a huge issue. If it wasn't for this cliquishness, there'd be no issue with any of this toxic behavior because they would have been called out, shut down, and kicked out already, right? But what happens is if the people who are engaging in the behavior, especially if they are influential in a clique, right? And this is what you got to think about. A lot of these toxic people are also predators. And when I say predator, I'm not just talking about sexual predator. No. Predator is a word that encompasses a number of predatory behavior. Basically, a predator is someone who preys and takes advantage of other people. They tend to be very cunning, okay? And there's a difference between cunning and smart. But they tend to be very cunning and clever in how to, read people, manipulate people. They are very good about seeing who they can take advantage of, right? So predators they will surround themselves with people who will believe them, invest in them, give them what they want, and they will often attack and attempt to undermine people who are a threat to them, right? Part of the reason why we've been the recipients of so many attacks and disrespect is because we have basically made every predator in our sphere of influence and around feel threatened, obviously because of what we stand for, right? But yeah, predators are very good about surrounding themselves with people, and that's usually one of the first things that they will do. They will build their little clique, right? If they move, say for instance, someone is international, they'll go to a city, they'll tap one or two people who are their people, and then they'll build around them and try to ostracize, hurt, harm the other people who are not a part of this group, and that's kind of how it works, right? And that's how people who are divisive, that's how they do it, right? Including some of the people I've been very critical of, because this is one of the things that people like this tend to do, right? So you build this clique of people around you who's basically your captive audience. They do whatever you say. They believe whatever you say. And then it's very easy at that point for you to do whatever, and then you tell them whatever, and they'll believe it, And you can engage in whatever, and you can explain it away. They'll look the other way. They'll support you. Now, sometimes it's because, again, like I said, one of the main tools of opportunists, especially if they're organizers, and that's why a lot of the most dangerous predators in our community are organizers, because they can offer things like, I'm going to give you some bookings, right? Even if it ends up being like maybe one booking a year or one booking in a couple of years, that bribery, that offer, that hope that there will be some sort of benefit makes them stick around, right? And then if you continue to get somebody to invest in you over a period of time, now they become emotionally attached into you because they've invested. And this is something that people like romantically do too, right? They get you hooked, and then they get you to keep investing emotionally in them, and then you have control, right? They've already invested so much, so the idea is, I've already invested this much, so I'm going to keep investing because I hope to get a return on what I've already invested. And they can keep stringing you along for a long time. People in relationships do this. People in the dance community do this. And it's very effective when people are opportunists, right? So opportunists are probably, if you're a predator, the opportunists are your main people you want to influence, especially people who are also in positions of influence, right? Because then you're the head of a clique, and then you have your lieutenants, and then you basically have your group of people, and you can basically do what you want, right? This is what happens, right? And the problem is there's a lot of problems. But, it's one thing, let's say sexual misconduct, right? Somebody raped somebody. And that's why, honestly, to this day, that's why a lot of these people accused of rape and sexual assault, they're only now starting to get called out, right? Because it's not just the predators bullying and threatening them. It's the people in their spheres of influence, the people in their cliques who are also doing the bullying, who are also making the threats, who are also ostracizing the people who are coming forward, right? And it's been very effective in keeping survivors silent until recently, which is a beautiful thing because, of course, I love to see, people who've been victimized become empowered, right? And take ownership of it. I love it. But part of the reason it's lasted this long is because you have this. Now, why are people clicking out? Okay, well, there are different kinds. There are cliques based on dance preferences. There are cliques based on music preferences. There are cliques based on like the cultural thing, and I'll talk about that for a second. And, it's perfectly fine to have, friends. It's perfectly fine to, come together and all that. There's nothing wrong with that. But what is wrong is when you see people in your community, you see people who are close to you doing wrong, and you look the other way because you don't want to be on the bad side of the group, right? Now, sometimes people look the other way. Sometimes they just drink the Kool-Aid and never question it, right? If you look up to somebody and let's say they are accused of sexual assault and they give you a story, you're going to want to believe it because this person's influential in your group, right? And I understand that, but what we need are more people who are willing to not just drink the Kool-Aid, but think for yourself a little bit, right? If someone in the dance community has come out and accused someone of sexual assault, and we're in the dance community, none of us have the millions of dollars that make it attractive or lucrative to make a false accusation. None of us have that kind of dough, right? Not only that, but you have, the bullying, the shaming, the slut shaming, right? The threats that come with everybody who comes forward, right? So you have to deal with all that flack, all that pushback, right? Why would somebody deal with that or even put themselves through that if something didn't happen, right? It doesn't make sense. Now, if you're free of the influence of these people, that should be, to my mind, a relatively easy, logical step here, right? There's no upside to coming forward, especially with deeply entrenched rape culture. There's no upside. There's no money in it. There's no fame. There's really nothing to gain from it except justice. So why would somebody do this, right? If all of us asked ourselves that question, there would be no more rapists or predators in our dance community. We would have cleaned them out a long time ago, But the problem is too many people have been willing to look the other way. Some because they're opportunistic, some because they're afraid of going against their friends, right? Some because they truly believe that these bad people are not that bad, right? And I'll talk about that at the end, at some of the things that I've seen people do to try to get out of real accountability. But this is the problem. Another thing I've seen, people who are of the culture, right? And it's important for me to say this right now because, you know, Kizomba, and I'll talk about Kizomba. Kizomba is from Angola, right? As a dance. And musically, all of the Palop countries have some sort of music that we dance Kizomba to. So culturally, music or dance-wise, you know, Palops can lay some cultural claim, right? So of course, there's a feel of cultural attachment and ownership. And there's concern that, you know, all these allegations of sexual misconduct is going to reflect poorly on them, especially since a number of the people who've been accused are of the culture, Palops, right? So first I want to say, unequivocally, Palops, Angolans, Africans, black people are no more predatory than any other race, nationality, or culture, okay? There are predators everywhere, right? It just so happens that the people who engage in predatory behavior tend to be in positions of influence. And in Kizomba, most of the people in positions of influence, as far as dance goes, many of them are black, right? Black men, African men, Palop men, right? So you're going to see some accusations because, again, it's usually the people and usually men, right? Although, again, women also can engage in this behavior, but traditionally it's been mostly men who have been in positions of influence. And in Kizomba, unlike society, black men are at the top as far as privilege goes, whereas in society we are at the bottom, right? That's why you're seeing a lot more accusations against black men right now. That's all. It's not because black men are more predatory than anybody else. And so, you know, I want for people, I don't want to see anybody trying to construe this as an African men thing. And I've seen some people try to even pull it as a cop off, like, oh, you know, it's a culture thing. No, wrong is wrong. But here's the problem. If you are someone who wants to defend the culture, or you claim to be about defending the culture, you should be on the front lines standing against this toxic behavior. And that's sexual assault and disrespect. And here's a problem. A number of the people who've engaged in these bad behaviors are people of the culture. But what happens? I see other people, not all, but some other people of the culture who are enabling them, continuing to work with them, co-signing them, laughing and joking and having fun with them when they are toxic. And here's the problem, right? Like I just said, that toxicity is not about where you're from or what your race is. But if you belong to the same group as somebody and they're engaging in bad behavior, it reflects poorly on you too. So if you don't do anything about it, you can't really then turn around and be mad when you're painted with the same brush. If you see someone out there who's really disrespectful and toxic and you continue to work with them or support them, if you see someone who's known to be a predator and yet you're co-signing and working with them and putting your name on events and flyers with them, don't be surprised when people who want toxicity out of their spheres of influence stop working with you, stop supporting you, right? Because at the point we're at now, you're either a part of the problem or you're a part of the solution. And that doesn't matter where you're from. The people who are closest to toxic people should be the main ones standing against it. Because if somebody is really your friend, you're not going to enable harmful behavior. You're going to tell them about themselves. You're going to make sure they're held accountable. And you're going to help, and if need be, you're going to help them seek help, right? You know, there was a question where somebody asked something to the effect of, if your friend was accused of sexual assault, how would you respond? And for me, first of all, it would depend on whether they're honest with me about it, right? Because again, I have not seen one person in the dance community accused of sexual assault actually own it. Everybody's innocent. Everybody is falsely accused. Everybody is going to take legal action. Good luck trying to prove, especially when you know you've been engaging in some bad behavior. Yeah, good luck trying to prove that somebody accusing you of sexual misconduct is lying, especially in the dance community when there's no benefit, there's no upside to coming forward. There's no upside except for the hope of justice. That's it. Good luck, right? I haven't seen one person own their shit. And the reason I haven't seen one person own their shit is because every single one has their enablers. People who look the other way, people who focus their attention on trying to defend themselves or their groups or their cliques rather than dealing with the toxic behavior, right? I've seen people say in other dances who are laughing at Kizomba saying, oh, I knew Kizomba was dirty. Kizomba is no more dirty than any other dance form. It's just that we have people in Kizomba like us and others who are taking a stand and doing what it takes to clean this community up now. So it may be ugly right now and it may not look the best, but a year from now when we've cleaned all of these predators out, and I say a year from now because that's my goal, get them all out. By the time coronavirus is done, I'd like to see all the predators out of our community. They're already out of our sphere of influence. I'd like to see them out of the whole community, though. I mean, a man can dream, right? But if we had more people who are willing to stand up for what's right rather than trying to cover their own asses or protect their friends, we wouldn't have had to deal with this, right? So those of us who are actually putting in the work to do so, the Kizomba community, when we're done with this cleaning, is going to be a shining example of a healthy, respectful community. To the other dance, if people in other dances are laughing and talking trash about Kizomba right now, I invite you to look to your own scene because there are predators and disrespectful jerks in every single dance community and every single community period where there are people, okay? We're just talking about Kizomba right now because we actually care about doing something about it. So to those out there making jokes about Kizomba, again, look in the mirror first. So yeah, toxic enablement, right? I don't care if you're friends. I don't care if you're from the same village. I don't care if you speak the same language. Wrong is wrong, okay? And the way I look at it as a professional, if you are a professional and you are associating yourself with toxic people, as far as I'm concerned, you're toxic now too. At some point, a line has to be drawn, right? And particularly, I'll talk one more time about the culture thing because this is something that has been mentioned so much in Kizomba and used to justify so much toxic behavior. And I have to mention it now because it's that important, okay? Culture is not an excuse for being disrespectful. Culture is not an excuse for sexual assault, sexual misconduct. It's not an excuse for anything, okay? Where you're from, where you're born, and what language you speak has nothing to do with being a decent damn human being, okay? And if you can't be a decent human being, you don't deserve to be in our community. And if you choose to support people who can't be decent human beings, then now I'm looking at you and questioning whether you're a decent human being. Because good people, at the end of the day, good people shouldn't enable bad people. Wrong is wrong. And if you're not a part of the solution, as of now, as far as I'm concerned, you're part of the problem. Because this can't go on, guys. I don't care if you share the same taste in music, dance, you're good buddies, from the same culture, from the same country, village, it's your brother. I don't care. Wrong is wrong. And the people closest to these bad actors should be the main ones holding them accountable. But if you choose not to do so, don't be surprised when you get painted with the same brush. And I'm saying that to the people who are now circling the wagons around predators instead of standing against the predatory behavior. It doesn't matter how much I may like you as a person. I may think you're the most talented person, someone who I personally learned from, someone I think is personally cool to hang out with. If you've engaged in behavior that's harmed people, then I can't mess with you or support you or invest in you until you've been held accountable for your bad behavior and you really make things right with everybody you've hurt. And I'll talk about what that looks like in a second. So yeah, this toxic enablement culture is a problem. Like for instance, when my mother was disrespected, right? You had a lot of people who look the other way. Why? Because it's okay if my mother's get disrespected because these people didn't like me, right? But by doing that, you only show how you know how little integrity you have, right? Because what if it's your mother who gets disrespected, or the mother of somebody close to you, right? Any toxicity that's going this way today will go your way tomorrow. It's only a matter of time, right? Wrong is wrong. And in our sphere of influence, we make sure that we don't support, hire, especially if you're a professional. If you're disrespectful, not just to us, but period. If you're nasty and toxic, we don't support you. And at this point, if you hire toxic people, and when I say toxic, I'm talking about the predators, I'm talking about disrespectful people. If you hire them, work with them, associate with them, we don't want anything to do with you, because ultimately we're trying to build a community free of that foolishness. And at the end of the day, guys, there's enough talent out there that comes in packages that are not toxic. There are enough people who can provide all the services you could want who aren't bad. And I'm not even talking about people with high standards like me. I'm not even talking about people with lots of integrity. There are people who are not evil, but not good, not evil, kind of in the middle, right? There are people who are just like, they're what I would call, in the middle. So there's no excuse. There's no reason for you to invest in bad people. And when I say bad people, I mean people who have harmed others and refuse to take responsibility for it. Because it's one thing to make a mistake, own it, and then do better, right? But to really do that, you have to genuinely apologize for all of your bad behavior. You have to make things right with all the people you've hurt or tried to. You have to accept the punishment, the consequences. And that's the thing. You can't say you're holding yourself accountable until you've accepted the consequences for your bad behavior. And I'm going to finish with that. So, sexual misconduct, disrespect, toxic enablement culture. And the last thing I'll talk about is how folks what accountability looks like and how people try to avoid it, okay? So, like I said, that there are different tools of toxic manipulators, right? Lies, flattery, bribery, deflection, projection, pity, and then you combine them to do things like gaslighting. Well, again, I've not seen one person accused of sexual misconduct publicly right now own it. And especially if your sexual misconduct isn't like, rape or something that's gotten physical. Maybe you just crossed the line of, you came on a little bit too strong and it was inappropriate, especially because you're in a place as a professional. Like as organizers, if we saw someone who maybe crossed the line a little bit, but they apologize to the people who they've harmed, they've made things right, they're forgiven, they get their shit together, maybe after a year or so, maybe we would work with them again if they show that they can, if they show that they've learned, right? But people who try to avoid consequences, that ain't being held accountable, okay? And so I'll end by talking about what I call the FOHO. The FOHO. It's basically a disingenuous apology, right? So for those who don't know, basically there's this congressman or whatever, and he disrespected a female congresswoman with very disrespectful stuff. We've all heard it before, but on, Capitol Hill, right? And here's the thing, right? He didn't say anything about it until he started catching some heat. So he gave this disingenuous apology, where basically he didn't really accept responsibility for the worst things that he did. Instead, he tried to deflect by saying things like, I have a wife and I have daughters, and I'm sorry if she misconstrued my words, right? So this dude basically cussed this lady out, right? Called her out of her name with the very misogynistic term B word, right? And then gave a fake apology where he didn't really take responsibility, right? And that's why the congresswoman, she then basically called him out in a brilliant 8 to 10 minutes. It was great. And, the problem is I've seen some of this start to happen in the dance community. When people get called out for their bad behavior, I often say toxic people rarely own their shit, right? They don't. It's always somebody else's fault. But there's one thing that sometimes the more cunning toxic people can do, and it's a very excellent deflection, projection, gaslighting. It's basically a gaslighting thing. And this is what you do. If you're accused of X, Y, and Z bad behavior, Z is the most heinous. That's going to get you in the most trouble. You will cop to maybe X and maybe deflect it or wash it a little bit to make it seem like it's not really your fault, right? So you'll apologize for some minor stuff. And then you to avoid apologizing for the worst behavior you've done, right? Like I said in the last video, you'll take a nugget of truth and you'll cover it with or you take the bullshit and you cover it with enough sugar so that people swallow it down. So be careful about people offering fake apologies, right? And I've seen one recently. I've seen a couple, right? You see people with disingenuous apologies, or, yes, she was amazing. You see the disingenuous apologies, and you always see the threat of legal action, right? But here's the thing about sexual assault that I find interesting. Nobody ever admits it, even when they're in court. Hell, even when they're convicted sometimes, people still think, I didn't rape anybody, it was consensual. I'm falsely accused. People just want to hate on me and take me down. You saw it when one of the instructors in our community was first accused, right? Start to feel confident, like, oh, they're just trying to take me down. Then more and more came in. Then it's like, ooh, okay, peace, right? Why is it that predators specifically never want to own up to their shit? I mean, I know why, obviously, because they don't want to go to jail or they don't want to be canceled. But what I will end with is people who are really contrite and really trying to do better will own up to all of their toxic behavior and make things right with the people they've hurt. Don't fall for the okie doke with the more cunning and clever predators or toxic people who will apologize for a little bit here and there to avoid the elephant in the room, right? Because you might think, well, they apologize. It seems like they're contrite here, so maybe no. Be careful, because anybody who's a successful predator is going to know how to BS people. And this is gaslighting, especially the ones who are predators but are presenting themselves as rape culture advocates. Be very, very, very careful, okay? Be very careful, because if you're not, you can easily get sucked into somebody's BS. Next thing you know, you're over there drinking the Kool-Aid and supporting bad people, and you didn't even know. Be very careful about that. People who are really serious about doing better, they accept the consequences of their action. They don't try to get around or get ahead of the consequences. No, they accept it. I was wrong. Nobody if you can't say I was wrong, especially if you're accused of sexual assault. Here's the thing, guys. If as a dancer, someone in the dance community has come forward and shared a story, and especially if it's detailed, right? Because for us, again, credible firsthand accounts is our standard. So if we read a detailed message of sexual assault, we've yet to see one that was a lie. We've yet to see one. There's no reason to lie. So be careful about these predators who are trying to get ahead of things right now, because the heat's turning up. And I tell you, you're going to see a lot more faux-hos. You're going to see a lot more. Wait, did I say his name right? I want to make sure I said his name right. Because his name is interesting. A yoho. I said faux-ho. A yoho. Be careful. You're gonna see a number of yohos come up now because the heat is rising, right? If you see people trying to appear contrite now, especially, if you've been engaging in this bad behavior for years, people didn't magically learn how to be a good person today. And here's the thing, guys. Anybody who doesn't know how to be a decent human being right now does not deserve to be a part of our community, right? If somebody wants to do better and actually, hold themselves accountable, do that outside of the dance community, and then come back when you've made things right with all the people you've hurt and when you've gotten your stuff together. The dance community is not therapy. The dance community is not a rehabilitation center for bad people. The dance community is a place where people go to try to get away from toxicity, to get away from drama, to get away from stress. People don't come dance or join our community to be preyed upon or disrespected. So the solution is very simple, good people. If you're an organizer, don't hire toxic people. It's relatively simple, if not easy. If you're accused of sexual misconduct with a credible firsthand account, don't hire them. Don't support events that hire them. People who are known to be nasty and disrespectful, don't hire them. Don't hire events that hire them. That's what we've done, and we don't have any problems with any of this in our sphere of influence. At our events, we don't have to worry about any of this. It's a very nice, harmonious vibe. And that's because we've already been very aggressive about keeping people like that away. Hasn't made us popular with a lot of people, but that doesn't matter because the people in our community get to enjoy a nice experience. And so will you when you do the same thing. Keep toxic people out of your spheres of influence. Keep the people who enable them, hold them accountable. I'm not going to say kick the enablers out, but we need to start holding these enablers accountable. That's very, very important, right? If you are an enabler of someone, stop, guys. If you really are somebody's friend, you're not going to enable them in their toxicity. You should want what's best for somebody you consider a friend, right? Now, if it's just like a codependent kind of thing, well, that's beyond the scope of this video. But stop enabling toxicity because you're not only hurting your friend, because if you're enabling them, they're not going to be held accountable and ultimately get the help they need, right? You're hurting the dance community because things can't go on like this, right? If this isn't cleaned up now, it could implode the entire community. Now, again, we've already built our own community, so if the rest of it burns down, if that's what needs to happen, fine. But I'd rather not everything not burn down, right? I'd rather, clear out the trash and then the remaining will be nice and healthy and, non-toxic, right? But yeah, and at the end of the day, keep a lookout for people who are truly authentic in their contrition, right? Who are truly trying to hold themselves accountable and not just being performative on social media, because I see a lot of performative stuff going on right now. Any contrition that doesn't involve real consequences, right, is inauthentic. It's a yoho. It's a yoho. And I tell you now, you're going to see a couple more yohos probably if you haven't already seen a few, right? Because when people realize that the heat's on them and they're not going to be able to get away scot-free or unscathed, they figure, well, I'll take a little heat from this that probably won't get me canceled, and I'm going to avoid the stuff that's either going to get me canceled or put in prison. Something to look out for. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wind down because I said I wasn't going to talk all night tonight. But yeah, these are some of the things that are most toxic, or some of the most toxic behaviors in our community, and the solution. I mean, the solution is basically the same for a lot of this stuff. Don't support bad people, and hold people who support bad people accountable. Hold them accountable. That means all of us have some personal responsibility here, not just the organizers, teachers, and DJs. All of us have personal responsibility because all of us can make a difference, right? Hold bad people who engage in bad behavior accountable. Hold the people who enable them accountable. Be on the lookout for cunning gaslighters, for predators who are trying to cover their own asses by appearing contrite when they really aren't. And also, last, be wary of, because this is the first thing, right? When a predator gets accused, the three things they do: they deny culpability, and then they try to attack the people who accuse them. Be careful. right? They're going to say clever things like, oh, they're just trying to take me down, or they're just trying to make a name for themselves, or they're just trying to get famous. But here's the thing. Nobody in the dance community who is an outspoken rape advocate or rape culture advocate, it doesn't help our business, guys, because most of the organizers are complicit or have been complicit in enabling rape culture. So if I'm criticizing that, if I'm criticizing something that most organizers have been complicit in, it doesn't help the business. So those of us who are actually speaking up, it does nothing for us, but it does everything for our community. So don't fall for the okie doke. Don't fall for the okie doke. If you want to see a community of quality, support quality. If you want to see a community of integrity, support integrity, right? If you want to end rape culture in our community, don't support predators. As simple as that. It's not easy, but it's simple. And lastly, if you want to be a part of the solution and talk about these issues, join the Kizomba Unity group. I'll put the link in the description. Thanks to everybody who's tuned in. I tried to keep this relatively short. I think it was relatively short compared to last time. Y'all be safe out there. I'll be making more of these lives about stuff, pertinent to our, the issues that are going on. And yeah, until next time, peace out. Now let me close this joint out. Catch you next time, good people.